I promise I know what I'm doing. What a way to kick off June with a brand new live stream here on Longbox Punk. That's me. I'm Chris. I'm the Punk, and I am joined today by Ben Lacy. My dude,
Hello.
Thank you for hanging out with me.
Oh, no
making
problem.
time on a Sunday. I'm excited to talk shop with you, talk comics and your process, and especially given your background and your history. I'm real excited to get into that with you. But before we really start getting into the weeds with Samson and the current Kickstarter for issues 1 and 2, I would love to know like how you initially got into comics as a fan, as you started creating comics. Like, where did this all begin for you?
Well, I've always been a fan of comics going back into the 70s to date myself, especially Marvel, some DC, like the bigger names like Superman and stuff.
Sure.
But I'd always wanted to, write comic books, and, I had ideas to do that, but I didn't have any way to do that. And then, about 5 years ago, I started hearing about, things like Kickstarter and crowdfunding, and also there were new digital art platforms that were out, Daz 3D, Clip Studio Paint, things like that. So, I had this idea for a comic book that I thought, maybe I'll try and do it myself, and I'll see if I can fund it on Kickstarter. That first comic was Shark of War. I did the art for that all myself using, more my computer technical skills than my actual artistic ability to draw. And I used a lot of the 3D modeling capabilities in Daz 3D. And then, I comicized it using Clip Studio Paint. And I was able to create Shark of War. And, the first 5 issues or so, I did the art myself, funded it on Kickstarter for each one. After that, though, my interest was more in writing. The time it was taken to do the art was really long, and my art was good for Shark of War, where it's a cyborg shark, and but when it came to doing people and things like that, that kind of art doesn't work as well, and especially in comic books and what comic book fans want. So at that point, I started hiring artists. That by then I was more integrated into the indie comic book community. I knew people, I knew where to go for artists. So I started hiring artists, and the last 3 issues of Shark of War, we're going to be doing issue 9 soon, have all been done by drawn by other artists who draw have actual capability to draw by hand, though most of it's done drawn digitally, of course.
Sure.
But and then 3 issues of Vicious Vixens, and now we're on the 2nd issue of Samson, which is of course what I got on Kickstarter right now.
Yeah. I love that you like took your existing knowledge with the 3D rendering and made the comic yourself that way. Like, that's so incredibly DIY of just finding a way to do it.
Yeah.
Like, instead of immediately going, well, like, I don't have the artistic ability, so I guess I got to find somebody. You're like, no, I can do this with computers, so I can make this work. I think that whole thing is super rad. So what's the process been like for you from going from writing and drawing, like with Shark of War, to just writing and working with an artist? Like, do you find that writing style is different when you're writing for somebody else?
Not a lot. I try and write. I write page by page, panel by panel. So I write. I view the page in my mind, kind of where I think it might look like, and come up with how many panels are going to be on that page, and then I write a panel by panel description. And I don't give a like this, except for certain panels. I don't say how big which one panel should be versus the other panel. So I hand that to the artist. I did a similar script for myself, though of course then I had to go figure out how big I wanted each of the panels to be and things like that. But and then what they usually do is they come back to me with thumbnail type sketches of each page with all the panels in thumbnail form, and then I comment on that, and we have a couple iterations probably before they try and do a more refined version, and then there might be a little more comment on that, and then that gets us to our finished product.
That's interesting. I like when you're writing. Have you seen with different, because you mentioned like Shark of War, Vicious Vixens, now Samson as well. Like, do you have different when you're writing, do you visualize each of those stories uniquely? Like, do you see one story way more visually in your mind as you're writing it than you do others?
Not especially. I'm kind of visualizing, I think I visualize all of them. Sometimes I might be further ahead in the story for some of them than the others, where I might have plotted it out through a longer arc
Okay.
or something than the others. First 5 issues of Shark of War, I had the whole first 5 issues written out completely in script form before I even started on issue 1.
Okay.
None of the other comics have I done that. It's all been issue by issue, though. I kind of have a direction for every for the story, and kind of a direction for multiple issues ahead. But it's more like a rough outline in my head, where I'm just really detailing one issue at a time now.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's do you have a overarching plan roughly for how long this story of Samson's going to go?
I'm thinking, I'd like to go at least 8 issues. If it went, if it goes really successful, starts getting bigger, I can go longer and become even an ongoing, super, like a standard superhero comic book where every month you have an adventure and, series of adventure. But for what we're seeing in this current arc, where he's, we're getting his origin in the past, and then in more in the present, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, the fall of the Soviet Union, and this new information's coming out where he's discovering that there's a whole new conspiracy of Nazi super criminals. That arc should take 8 issues or so is what I'm thinking.
Cool. So let's talk about Samson. So you've got the second issue is on Kickstarter right now. It's also linked in this episode description, so anybody watching or listening to this can tap expand details, tap on the link, and you're at the campaign checking it out. So tell me, like, the story so far for any brand new readers that might not be familiar with Samson.
Okay, Samson is about 2 young boys who have been taken to Auschwitz, and they're twins, and they are going to be experimented on, which is an actual fact that happened. There was experimentation on children and adults. There was a specific interest in twins by some of the doctors doing the experimentation. So, of course, the results were not what happens in a comic book. So in this comic book, obviously he's going to have a much more positive outcome. So we're following him as he's being experimented on, used as a guinea pig as part of this Nazi effort called Project Uberfuhrer to make a line of super soldiers. They want to make their own Nazi line of super soldiers. So they're using him as a guinea pig, and his brother. In the meantime, we cut ahead 50 years to the future after the fall of the Berlin Wall, when he's being told that one of these Nazi super soldiers is hiding out in America, and possibly, and they want him to go help find him. So that there's kind of a 2 parallel tracks to the story. So it's basically a 50-year epic, going from World War II to after the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the new information that came out, which is also something that happened in real life, is that new information about different things was found, because it was held in his East German archives and buried away.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me, like, how much continues or seems to continue to come out about, like, all of the things that the Nazi scientists were trying to do. Has World War II always been like a topic for you that you've always been interested in? Like,
not especially, it's specifically the war. I am Jewish, so I have that background, and I came from that. My mother's side of the family came from that same area as Samson came from, what is now the Ukraine, and was at the time Poland, part of Poland, but it's now part of the Ukraine. So yeah, I had an interest from that perspective, obviously, and I have the same interest in anyone in World War II kind of action, and the battle against the Nazis and things like that as well. So it was specifically to that interest, and I first conceived the idea a long time ago, actually, long before I got the idea for Shark of War. But um, you know, I was always thinking, there's not many Jewish superheroes, and there's a lot of Jewish creators though who are responsible for the superheroes that we do have for probably 80% of the big names. Superheroes came through a Jewish creator. So I thought, well, I'd like to do a Jewish superhero, and I'd like to have him be, it'd be integral to his identity as well in some way, in a way that, the Thing, occasionally we have a retcon in.
Yeah.
Same with Kitty Pryde. Same with Magneto. Not that he's not that I consider him a hero at all, but
yeah,
but, these are all kind of retconned in later on in Marvel comics, and they're they make them kind of relevant, but it's not in this case he has powers simply mainly because of who he was and his what happened to him because of that.
Yeah, it is something to be said where from the start, like where this person's coming from. Because and even in the just time that we're in of 2025 of like, oh well, we're gonna change this character's backstory completely. And like with the House of X, Powers of X, they completely changed Moira McTaggart's like entire character to make it something different for that story. And it was like, I understand what they're doing, but like it's a whole new character now. Like what it changes everything. But sliding in small details like with Ben Grimm, and Shadowcat, and like Magneto is more prominent with like that's where his hatred for humanity comes from.
It worked in kind of an interesting way with Magneto, but he's not a hero in my book. I know sometimes he's portrayed that way, but I wouldn't support that argument.
Agreed. So I like having being Jewish and having parents that were in that era. Was representing the Judaism like always something that you wanted to do as you were writing, even before you got to Samson?
Not especially. I'm not a very religious Jew. In fact, in some ways, I don't think his character is that either. He's more of a, he's Jewish by birth. So no, I want to be true to the people though at the time, and I am trying to represent them accurately, and what their experience was. But the religious aspect isn't specifically a major part of the story, though. It does come up some. In fact, in issue 2, there'll be a moment where you wonder whether there's something more higher power calling and involved in something. But yeah, it's meant to reflect an experience of this person, but not be a detailed Jewish experience.
Sure.
It's not the
it's not the like major defining trait of his. Cool. And also, so in the second issue, we're going to meet Omega Girl. Who is she that you can give away? I don't want you to spoil it.
I can't give away a whole lot. I mean, this is, we're going to, it's part of his backstory, his history. He's somewhat of a tragic character. Even though, I think I make the point, he came out of the Holocaust better than just about anybody, obviously, simply because what happened to him worked out well for him. But, in a lot of ways, it cost him as well. And we're going to see some of that cost, and the Omega Girl will represent some of that cost as well. And I can't give away much more, but she is close to him in some way. and you'll see that in issue 2, and it'll be explained.
Awesome. And then another thing that I just think is like super awesome is the Uber Kong. It was teased at the very end of issue 1. Like, is that coming from like where did that idea come from?
A couple of things. I don't know if you ever remember, you read Miracle Man. by Alan Moore.
Yeah.
He's one of the people I consider kind of an inspiration. And in Miracle Man, there's Miracle Dog, and
Yeah.
Miracle Dog is not a puppy dog by any stretch of the imagination. And the point was, he was the first try, to make a miracle creature. And I was thinking, it does make a lot of sense that, they're gonna test this on animals, and what animal would make the most sense, a monkey, and
Yeah.
in this case, an ape, to do your experimentation on. And Uber Kong's also somewhat of a tragic figure, as we'll see in issue 2 as well. You'll actually have a tiny bit of sympathy for him as well, because he's basically a creature that's been experimented on. He's
Yeah, I mean, even thinking to like the original King Kong movie, like he's an incredibly tragic character.
Yeah. So you're gonna. I mean, he has to be stopped, but he's also, his motivation's understandable, and I think that'll come up in the course of the story as well.
Yeah, that's cool. And I like to seeing the process of all of the like costume iterations and the process of developing the Samson's
Right.
final look. Is that something that like, did you have something specific in mind that you gave the artist, or was that like, hey, this is what I'm thinking, and then they just turned
Right.
in a bunch of different iterations?
Yeah, I basically had certain ideas I wanted represented: Star of David, the Hamsa hand on the belt buckle, the life symbol on the sleeves, and then it was basically a discussion of how the costume looks, and then I kind of put 3 or 4 different choices to my readership for the blue and white, because that was the how much is blue, how much is white, how does it go, and I let them vote on it basically. And
Oh, cool.
for that option is it had everything I wanted in it, and so I as far as the blue white split and how that worked, I basically turned it over to my backers and said, which do you like best, and they told me, and that's what kind of went with on that.
That's awesome.
But yeah, he has he'll have an earlier costume, and when he a Silver Age or Golden Age costume from after World War II, when he winds up going to Israel, basically, and they make him their Captain America kind of figure, where it's more of a comic book looking costume with a cape and things like that, that quickly get ditched, and then evolve into a more practical. His current costumes come more like fatigue army kind of thing, but with the colors and everything else. So it's a much more durable, practical costume.
Yeah. And just personally, I think I prefer seeing heroes that have very functional costumes.
Right.
Instead of like a Spider-Man where it's like you're just wearing spandex. Like, how do you where is everything that you like? Having tactical boots and stuff, like if he's going through mud or muck or grossness, whatever, like he doesn't have to worry about it. So there's something to be said about a very practical design that I just always appreciate. So
I was thinking, the Captain America costume, in the first Captain America movie, when he first comes out, he's basically in this cotton Captain America costume, and then it kind of evolves into a much more practical outfit, later on. Similarly, in the Incredibles, the no capes, and the cape quickly gets destroyed, and it's like, this isn't going to work.
Right. Right.
So
and speaking of influences too, I know you mentioned Miracle Man. A lot of your homage covers are homages to Superman or Action Comics. Is that because Superman was one of your like personal favorite superheroes?
Yeah, a lot, and I like him a lot, and I also thought it worked really well as a homage. I especially liked some of the covers. I think he has some of the coolest covers too. The cover with the cover pulling open the suit, the
It's Alex Ross, right? Yep.
Alex Ross homage, the photorealist, that looks really, cool. And I think my artist did a really good job capturing that. Similarly, a lot of his golden and silver age covers are really cool. The one there we did, his Supergirl appearance in Action comic books, or I guess, I don't know if it was her first appearance or not, but that it looked like her first appearance in Action Comics, popping out of the spaceship. So we did something like that. It just works really well with, with his and what the character himself, Samson's power set and things like that, to use Superman. Of course, backers like it too. So, I'm thinking from a business point of view. Someday I'd like to. There's all these Superman is a jerk covers. I don't know if you've ever seen them, but the Silver Age, it makes it act like he's a monster. Of course, it turns out in the story that that's not really what's happening. But someday I'd like to do one of those as well, because I always thought they're hilarious.
Yeah, I definitely like, and even thinking about like seeing in the Justice League movies, I think it was Justice League movie where they like spray paint all over the statue and deface it that way. It's like, well, yeah, there would be like, you have this basically god of a superhero that can do everything. Like there's gonna be a pack of people that are like, no, like that's too much. He's too good. So I do those are the stories that have always interested me in Superman, because him being so like having all of the powers and being able to do everything all the time was always just kind of like too much for me, that it was just like, well, that's not interesting, because he could like, what's the point of him fighting anybody? He's gonna win. Seeing the stories where he's humanized and has those, has to deal with the morality questions or whatever, like those are the ones. Like the death of Superman is one of my favorite Superman comics, because it's just like it humanizes him in a way that hadn't been done before, because it's like, well, he's not a god, like he can die. Plus, in the Return of Superman, we got Superboy, and that's my favorite. Superboy is always my favorite, like iteration of the
Connor Kent version.
Yep. So, but yeah, so like, did you always know that you had? I know you mentioned that you've been working on this story much longer than Shark of War. Like, what is it about telling a superhero story that was so like long standing for you, or something that you had working for that long?
Well, that's you're a traditional comic book fan. Most of the comic books are superhero comic books, and that's probably what you got into. And that's kind of what I got into, is liking superhero comic books and wanting to do superhero comic books. So the reason I went with Shark of War to start with is partly practical, because it's a comic that has a unique identity, and it's not competing with everybody else's superhero comic book. And it has a description and something different, so I can market it as that and sell it as that. Whereas Samson is a superhero comic book, and it's focused on Jews in some way, so that's kind of an audience, potentially limiting audience. So far, it seems to be going okay on my Kickstarter. So is a very much partly a practical reason. Partly I knew that Samson would have to be done by a regular artist and a traditional artist, not something I could do myself and do a good job of. So that those are the kind of things that kept it on the back burner for a while, until I built up some of it, sort of an audience, a small audience, but an audience of people who regularly back me on stuff and want to read my stuff.
Yeah, the building an audience piece is like the big, like, magical, mysterious piece that creators always have to crack. Especially, I just saw a post from Bent Box Comics, who has been on the show as well, and he was he like literally was just searching on Kickstarter to see how long it took him as a new user, not logged into Kickstarter, to find his book in their like recommended for you thing. And it was fascinating that he was even thinking about that, because as someone who's about to launch my first Kickstarter, it's like, I didn't even think about that. Like, how did you start building your fan base? Was it purely like reaching out on social media
I,
and
I,
stuff like that?
well, I had a little help. I found this Kickstarter course, comics launch,
Mhm.
which has it's a fairly big. It's both a creator community, and it's run by a person who basically teaches a course on how to set your comic book Kickstarter up,
Okay.
how to build your audience up. And he has, he successfully funds comic books on Kickstarter, and he formed this community of other people, so it's a pretty large so that helped a lot. I learned how to set up my email list, and that my focus needs to be on building a big email list. Got ideas on how to expand my email list, and then I was also part of this community where they shared my project out. I shared their project out, so I got some backers and people that way.
Yeah.
So it was a combination of that helped me a lot. I didn't just walk in and post Sharkable on Kickstarter. I'm sure I would have gotten 10 backers and $100 or something,
Yeah.
without having done that groundwork to set up an initial audience. And then
Yeah.
with each Kickstarter, I hope to grow it a little bit each time. I go to Comic Cons and get people to sign my anybody who buys my book, I ask them to sign up for my email list and give them digital comics in return. So hopefully building my list up that way as well. So a lot of that.
Yeah. Okay. And because I always like, it always feels like with social media, there's this gigantic untapped potential of like, oh, there's 8 million users on Blue
Mm-hmm.
Sky.
Yeah.
And then, you look at like the algorithm stuff and it's like, well, I have like 3,000 followers on Blue Sky, but my
Yeah.
average post is getting like 60 views. Like, oh, that's so disheartening. how do you like continue to persevere in
Well,
spite of that stuff against you?
well, for one thing, I don't use Twitter or Blue Sky much because I found the same thing. I think your tweet or whatever they call a Blue Sky post
Yeah.
is seen for a fraction of a second by as part of a scrolling feed. It's not given to everybody. A lot of your your followers on Blue Sky or Twitter are probably other writers, not
Right.
customers necessarily. So yeah, so I think on Facebook it's a little better because your page is locked in to your posts. So if you have people who subscribe to your page, I think they're a little more likely to see it. But even there, you don't get a ton of views.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think most of my people who go to my Kickstarter are previous backers who are on my email list, who am I cutting out here? Who are on my email list and then and come to me that way,
Okay.
or come to me through Kickstarter notifying them again because they decide to follow my project. So yeah, it's much more. The email list is more important than any of the other things for my purposes. What I find.
And just because I've never like ran an email list before, like how does that work? Do you like just have a spreadsheet somewhere that you like keep all the emails and then you copy paste them into the to line and type up your email? Like how does that, or do you use
No,
that?
well, I occasionally you do that when I'm like toward the end of the Kickstarter. I'll put it in I'll put a lot of the emails in my BCC and email
Mm,
through that. That would try and get by spam filters and things. But most of the time, I've uploaded my list to an email service. I use SendFox because that's very low price for being able to send a fairly large subscriber list emails. And I
okay.
use Substack because
Okay.
Substack will let you put all your emails on there, and they'll let you send off. And BackerKit Launch will sometimes let you do free emails through their service. Sometimes they charge.
Mm,
I think it's a luck of the draw whether you get free, but they can connect to Kickstarter, upload your previous backers, so that when you do an email through BackerKit Launch, it goes to all your previous backers, and
that's awesome.
On Kickstarter, you can do the same thing, but it doesn't, you got to do it a project at a time, not all the projects at once. And of course, the filters on Gmail and other accounts that people read, a lot of that gets either shunted off to spam, or it gets shunted off to like a promotion folder or an update folder. So, people don't always see that. So you kind of got to over email people and hope you don't annoy them too badly that they just don't want to hear from you ever again. So it's a fine line. Occasionally I get people going, you're emailing too much. I don't want to hear from you anymore. I'm like, I'm sorry. I got, but the reality is you kind of have to do it. I mean, if you want to get your project funded, you have to keep going out with the word.
Yep. Yeah. And I heard too, because I've been reading as much as I possibly can from other creators of like, Kickstarter expectations and how to build like a base of backers and all that stuff. And it was, someone had said like the average pre-launch follower number. So like we're sitting at, I think 50 pre-launch followers, which is great. But they said like of those 50 followers, only expect to convert like 20% of them to actual backers. And it's like, everything just feels like it's all like insurmountable.
It's a small, a fairly small percent of your followers. I've done up to 40% before. I think I have some loyal, people who back me again. But yeah, the people that you'll see that 100, 200, pre-launch followers and think that's what you're going to get, and a good chunk of those people won't be coming back. But fortunately, other people who never follow will also probably back. So that'll make up for a lot of that.
Yeah. So do you, because you've got like the Vicious Vixens, Shark of War, Samson, because you've got all of these different titles, do you like stagger how you release them or create them and do the crowdfunding piece?
Yeah, I mean, lately I've just been doing one after the other. I did Shark of War, then I did Vicious Vixen. I did Shark of War 8, Vicious Vixens 3, now Samson 2. I just sent the script for Shark of War 9 off to the artist. I'm writing Vicious Vixens 4 right now, and then I'll probably write Samson 3 right after that. So it's kind of been going in a rotation to try and keep all the balls in the air. The good part about that is like, I keep getting comics, but the bad part about it is none of these issues, each Shark of War, I may only get 1 or 2 issues out a year. Same with each of the other comics, because realistically doing more than 3 or 4 Kickstarters in a year starts to get hard. I mean, I know some people who do it like every month, and they it's kind of like a machine-like process, but I'm not set up for that. I don't know how quickly I would be. I guess if I was making huge amounts of money on it, and I'd start cranking up the speed more. But I'd like to have my books kind of like being finished off when I start the next Kickstarter, so I can tell the backers of that book. For example, I just sent out the rewards for Vicious Vixens #3, and I message those backers saying, hey, your rewards are in the mail, or most of them have arrived by now. And by the way, Samson is out now too. I hope you'll check it out at this, so hopefully they're pleased, and they go now to my next comic.
Yeah. That I can't even imagine, like my co-creator and I have been doing, it feels like nothing but talking and planning and creating and building and all of these things for our campaign. And I can't imagine trying to balance multiple at the same time, or even like back to back, like month to month, that like you're fulfilling one, but you're running another. Like, I don't have it in me to do that on top of everything else.
It gets to be, it is a time consuming operation. If you're the point where you're not big enough to justify handing that off to somebody else, which most of us aren't, then there's a fair amount of time in setting up your Kickstarter, marketing your Kickstarter, and then ordering the comics, and then packing all the comics and shipping all the comics and everything else. That takes a fair amount of time that it's not part of the stuff you really probably want to be doing either. But which is maybe working on the comic book itself and continuing with it. But that's just the necessity of the game.
Yeah. Yeah. And now, have you like pitched any of your stories to like small publishers or anything, or tried to get them like listed within, well, previously Diamond or Lunar, like to get them into comic shops?
I haven't really tried to do directly to push them to comic shops. I didn't think the ordering amount would be worth it, and the price that I would have to offer relative to the price to me wouldn't be worth it. I pitched a couple times to like Scout and Dark Horse and stuff, but I didn't get anything from that. I don't. Some of the like Scout, I don't think is doing that well, but an Image, of course, probably only wants people, and Dark Horse want people who are names with big credits. So to some degree, I look into it every now and then, but for the most part, not. Every now and then, I try and join an anthology or something that some other creator is doing, so I can get some cross promotion with them. So I've had a couple stories in different anthologies by Dren Productions, which is they're bigger than me, but they do like $10,000-$20,000 Kickstarters, but they're not huge either. So
yeah, that's a good idea too, of just like expanding your reach by contributing, like thinking of an anthology as a chance to show off what you can do. Like I just think that like that's a approach or perspective on anthologies. My journey of reading has been very roller coaster of like what I read and the genres that I read, and that was ever changing for a long time.
Right.
And then even like, oh, I love single issues, and then I got into trades, and then it's like, well, just give me the in between, like give me like an 80 pager, like that's my niche. Like I love that length. I can sit down and read it in an hour, and like I get a full story, and that's like, so that's where I'm at now. But I never used to like anthologies because I always wanted more from the stories. And now I love anthologies because I'll back an anthology because of a creator or creative duo or something. And like the theme might be really something that's interesting, or if it's an all horror, because I love horror comics. So like, if it's, we have a horror anthology and I know like 2 names, like I'm probably going to back that anthology. And then I take it that next step. And once I get it, if there's other stories that I really liked, and it's like, well, who is that person? What else have they done? What else have they worked on? What are they? And then, so like, I'm the person that's doing the thing that you are approaching anthologies to do.
Right.
And I just, switching from being a reader and a fan and a podcaster about them to being a creator as well. Like I haven't been able to make that switch yet of thinking about things from like the business standpoint. Cause you mentioned like, fans like those. So from a business point of view, like they're an easy sell. I've never once thought like, oh, that'd be a good business decision to do that. I'm still like just the fanboy creator. Like, where do you think that comes from for you to already have that like business minded attitude? Is that because of your like outside of comics experience of like
somewhat, I don't want to take a big loss on it. I don't make money on this by any stretch. I lose money every time, but I don't want to lose a ton of money either. So I want to minimize the loss, and more importantly, I want to maximize the readership. So I'm willing to actually take less money to get more readers to some degree. So that's why I try to price everything very affordably. If you look at my current Kickstarter, all my back issues, you can get all my digital issues for 14 comic books for $25, which is less than $2 a comic book. So in that price way, I'm underpricing Marvel or DC on digital comic books, because I figure I want to get people to read it. I don't want to get people to just take my latest issue and back it. I want to get people to read my other comic books as well. So, I'm willing to offer that digital package for $25, which is like, I think a really good deal for people who, like digital comic books. I'm a physical comic book person, but if you like digital comic books and you're happy with that, then I give you a really good deal. If you like the actual physical books, and you want to get all my back issues, basically I charge Comic-Con prices for all the back issues. So if you go through the pricing, the base cover for Samson is $15. But if you want to get all my back issues, which is, hardcover Shark of War, which compiles the first 5 issues, then the floppies of 6, 7, and 8, Vicious Vixens 1 through 3, Samson 1 and 2, and my Cthulhu Man one-off, which was a spinoff of Shark of War, my horror comic book. 14 comic books effectively. It's $75 because I'm pricing those at the same price, those back issues at the same price I'd sell them at a Comic-Con, but you also get them shipped to you. You get the digital copies as well, and you get all the bonuses, including the print, the Alex Ross print, and any other stretch goal prints we might achieve, stretch goal bonuses we might achieve, because I'm always trying to get people to get all my stuff.
Right. Right. I mean, that's smart from, again, like building the audience.
Yeah. So I'm not looking to make, a lot of money on my back issues. I'm at that point, I'm happy if I'm pretty much covering the cost and maybe making up some of what I spent on other stuff with it, to pay for the latest book.
Yeah.
So I try to offer those at a really reasonable price, that I think, is really competitive for, the number of books you're getting.
And did I see too, that I'm looking back as well here. Did I see that it covered, like, the cost has shipping built into it?
For US backers, yeah, I always offer free shipping. Foreign backers, it's usually $15 to $20 more, which is, pretty reasonable considering what it costs to ship to those places. Even the cheapest shipper, and I think I found the cheapest shipper for foreign stuff is you're going to pay, I pay probably $20, $15 to $20 extra just to ship to those countries. So yeah, I do have to charge foreign shipping.
Yeah. So how does that work? I feel like shipping is just this crazy big monster that is just like terrifying to me. I don't know why, but like, how does that work for setting up the campaign? Because I do also, like, a lot of the folks that watch the show are also creators. And so part of why I like doing this is because I just get nerdy about the details, like logistically and stuff. And so while it is a lot of work setting up a Kickstarter, like, the process of learning how all of those things work was like gratifying to me, because then at the end of it, it was like, oh, I have a campaign page that looks like a campaign page. But like, there's really not much that I could find on Kickstarter specifically about shipping other than like include it or charge later. So like, how is the price of shipping built in so that you can do free shipping?
Well, I kind of know what the price of shipping a comic book is in the United States. So, it's you're probably going to have, it's probably going to be a single comic book's probably going to be 8 ounce, depending on how you're packaging it, whether it's in a stay flat mailer or you're using a Gemini, thing, a Gemini cardboard folder. It's probably going to be 8 ounces or so, and so what the cost of the fold, the packing material is, and what the cost of the shipping it is to most places. I don't tell the post office I use media mail, where they frown. Technically, there's a big debate about whether comic books without ads should qualify as media mail or not. The post office pretty much generically says comic books don't qualify for media mail, because most comic books by the big two have ads in them, and that doesn't qualify for media mail. Whereas our comic books usually don't have ads in them, or don't have, maybe have the ad from the printer or something on the back page. So whether we should be charging them media mail, technically not, but I often send media mail. So far I've never had a trouble with it doing that, but you so you know what the median mail rate is. You can also check what the the regular post office rate is, which sometimes for smaller packages isn't much more. The median mail rate saves you the most on bigger packages where you're sending multiple books.
Okay.
So you have an idea of what your you're probably gonna be paying $5 to $8 to mail off every package, depending on the number of books in it and stuff.
And that just comes from the experience of doing this for
right. You can go. I mean, get it. I have a stamps.com account. There's ShipStation. There's Pirate Ship, and other mailer services you can use to print your postage and print your shipping labels and everything like that I use. So I usually use stamps.com for US and Pirate Ship for overseas.
Okay. Yeah. And those are the two that I've heard the most of for like the shipping partners or services or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, it's just a lot, especially with everything changing all the time. It is like, and I've never mailed anything more than like a letter to Canada. Is Canada international? Because it's like, or is it cheaper because it's the same continent? Like that feels like a ripoff, right?
It is a little cheaper, but it is international. Shipping a pound to Canada maybe is $12, and shipping it to Australia is 20 or something like that. So it is definitely a good twice as much as what you'd pay to ship something internal to the U.S.
That's
so
insane.
it's considered international. Pirate Ship is probably your best bet for international shipping, is what I found. They have something called global export rate that's cheaper than anybody else by a pretty good margin.
These are the things that nobody tells you about when you start talking about like, I want to make a comic. And then fast forward and you're researching shipping platforms and understanding tariffs and customs and all those things. I just there's so much to learn about all of that.
Some of it you'll just find out by doing. The shipping, I didn't work out much on the shipping other than have a generic idea of how much the rates would likely be when I first started. And so that and then I just did it. So it worked out.
Yeah, that's cool. I love that. Like, I just love all of I just did the thing. Like, I just made the thing. From the 3D rendering stuff and then into like I just figured it out and whatever. So like is that, and this is all still like passion stuff for you, right? Making comics? Like you're engineer by day?
Well, I'm retired now, so
okay.
I'm older, hopefully older than I look, but I'm old enough to be retired. So
I didn't think you were retired. So,
so this is it was recent, but this just recently. But yeah, so this is one of my main. This is kind of one of my main projects that I do. Other travel more and do other retirement type stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. Good for you. Yeah, I would have never guessed that you're retired. So you look much younger than you are, sir.
Thank you.
So you've got these, the three main titles that you've had several issues of, besides the one shot, that all feel different from each other. Do you have do you already have other ideas for other stories that are different, or are you like just?
Oh yeah, I mean. Yeah, I definitely do. And occasionally I'm like, do I want to do another book? And I'm like, no, I can't. I mean, if I want to keep, Shark of War going, Samson going, Vicious Vixens going in a reasonable time frame, I can't throw in another book. Like I said, if I had a whole service, or, part of a company, I could probably do something like that where, I'd have other people doing a lot of the stuff I have to do. It could probably be done, but that's why it's so nice to work for, if you're working for a big two publisher, you can probably do 2 books a month as a writer, or 3 books a month, maybe even. But when you're not, you're getting 3-4 books out a year, more than that, start to really be pushing it. So yeah, there are other ideas I've had, spin-offs for Shark of War. I thought about doing another issue of Cthulhu Man. It kind of ended, it was a one shot, but it certainly had an open story. It had a couple of potential spin-off characters as well that could be brought into a comic book. I had an all ages idea for Shark of War, much more of a, shark having adventure, Scooby-Doo style, kind of all ages book. And then I had this, I have a whole other universe idea that I would be interested in, but just there's no way to do it and keep the other books moving. So, maybe someday.
Never say never, right?
Yeah.
That's the and like I think a lot of the just the amount of time that it takes to make one comic is vastly underestimated by just like casual fans of comics. Because like I knew it took time, right, to make and coordinate and all that stuff. But it's like, well, Marvel and DC are putting out, 30 monthly titles. How hard can it be? And then it's like, well, they're massive companies that have a logistics, a marketing, a printing, like editing, all of the things so that the creators can create and send, and then someone else takes it and runs with it. And then like as an indie creator, you have all of those hats on at the same time. Like just in the last week, I was writing down ideas for the next chapter of our book. I was doing artwork on a variant cover that I'm doing. I was putting reward tiers together. I was building images for the website. Like I was doing all of these things, and it was like, Chad, every day is something different, which is good for me because I'm ADHD. So I always am all over the place, but like not everybody can do that. And that's the big time suck is, can't we just make comics and do them? And then it's like, well, yeah. And then after it comes out, you're not done either. Cause then like you said, you have conventions. Like, do you travel to go to local conventions? Do you do a bunch of those a year? Or
I try to do, the first year I was doing too many. I probably almost did a dozen or 10 to a dozen a year. I try to do, 5 or 6 a year, especially the ones that are closest to me. But I'm in South Carolina, so I do some of the South Carolina cons. I've gone up to North Carolina and Georgia. Next month, I'm going down into Florida in Jacksonville. I'll do a one-day con there. And I may also this month I haven't set it up yet, but I may do a one-day con up in North Carolina. A few months ago, I went as far north as New Jersey. I combined that with a visit to family because I'm probably not going to make enough on the con to justify that kind of trip otherwise. I definitely try to go to a number of cons. Always signing up people for my email list, and hopefully by people will buy something, and usually I sell something, but always never as much as I'd like. But.
Right. Yeah. And have you ever going to a con, because I know tables can be really pricey, have you ever split the table cost with another creator?
No, I haven't. First off, I bring a fair amount of stuff, so I like to have at least a 6-foot table to myself. If I had to, if it was Dragon Con or New York Comic Con, maybe I'd think about it for that. But, but I like to have the 6-foot table, preferably the 8-foot table, because I have multiple comic books now. I also bring a bunch of shark plushies with me as well for people who at the Comic Con who don't like comics but will buy a shark plushie, so I have something extra to sell. And that makes up a chunk of my sales, so it helps. So I haven't split yet, and I also look for cons that are lower price. You can find one-day cons where you might pay $50 to $100 for the table, and there's still some decent 2-day cons that are big-ish, medium size, where you maybe can get away with $200 for the 2 days. Here at Greenville we have SC Comic Con, which is a fairly big con, and they're $200. Soda City Con down in Columbia, South Carolina is $200 or so.
Okay.
Heroes Con in Charlotte, which is a much bigger con. They're still fairly reasonably priced. I think they're like $325. I'm not doing it this year, but I've done it before. I don't really like the 3-day cons, which is what that one is, because Friday turns out to be a dead day, especially if you have to travel. You know, you got to travel, you got an extra day of going, and Friday is going to not be worth much at all. And of course, Sunday is worth less than Saturday. But so my sweet spot is really 1-day cons to a large degree, but I do some 2-day cons.
That's cool. I'm just always, I've worked a couple as a vendor, but for like friends that have small companies or something that fits in the comic niche. And like I've hosted at conventions before for like cosplay contests and stuff like that. But the idea of tabling for a 3-day con just on its own idea, I'm like, I love talking to people, and I don't know that I would want to do a 3-day con. Like, that's so much tabling. And it's just, I can't even imagine the grind that would be to do that. And there's people that only do like the 3 or 2 like full day huge cons, and it's just like, I don't know what kind of caffeine you're getting to do those shows, but can I have some? Because holy cow.
Yeah, well, you got to pace yourself. And, you know, and not, like I said, the first time I did them, I was booking one a month or practically. And after a while, it was just like, this is too much.
Yeah. Yeah. Because then you like the unsung part of that, right? Is the load in and first organizing and ordering everything and having it at your house, and then getting it all to fit in your vehicle and getting there, and then setting it up and making sure it's eye catching and, you know, draws people in and all it's just a lot. And then tear down at the end of it after having talked to however many hundreds of people.
Well, fortunately, I've got it down. So I usually have I can usually do it pretty quickly, because I usually carry 3 boxes, and I have a little hand cart that I haul them in. So I can usually, you know, set up and tear down fairly quickly. It's not like I'm a vendor there, you know, selling a bunch of back issues where I have tons of racks with all the displayed comic books, and I have all these big long boxes and stuff like that. You know, I kind of know how much I'm likely to sell, and I bring extra in case I outdo it, because I'm always hopeful. But yeah, I usually bring like 3 boxes with me, and then a couple of things to set up my display. I have an inflatable shark I mount over the table, so that's kind of what I'm known for at Comic Cons.
That's great.
My inflatable shark over the table. And I'll also sometimes wear my shark hat. So
it's perfect. I love that you just fully lean into it.
Oh yeah. I want to have it. Yeah. I want people to notice me, and that, you know, people are always nice, but, you know, not all of them buy, because as you find out at a Comic-Con, most people there aren't there for comics. And that's kind of the disappointing reality, but that is the reality.
Yep. Isn't it weird? Like I do. So I have always been like all comics all the time. And if there's extra stuff, like cool, but like I go to talk to creators and, you know, dig through the dollar bins and the 50-cent bins that vendors are just like trying to offload, you know, whatever back issues they can. But my wife is the flip side of that, where she likes the movies and the TV shows, and she loves those vendors. And then only because of me, like I'd have bought her enough comics at this point to fill almost an entire long box. Cause I'm like, no, this is the thing that you should read the book, like read the source. And so now she's got a bunch of those, and she's picked up a few on her own, where she's like, okay, well, that sounds kind of cool. So like, okay, I'll buy that. But you know, I wish that I'm hunting down more comic specific cons. And then like for the expos, they should just be like the Fanboy Expo should just be about pop culture. Like don't call it a Comic-Con if there's a vendor selling, you know, their own comics or something. Like that's a pop culture con. So
yeah, it's definitely you know, the cons are definitely you know, the smaller cons are actually, in some ways, they're probably better for because there are more people for comic books. In other ways, though, a lot of times they turn out to be back issue shows, basically, you know, for people coming there for their comic collections and stuff like that. But you know, so it's a mix. You get less people. More likely, a percentage of them will be interested in comic books, but some of them will only be interested in, you know, comic books from 1970, you know, 1980.
And I definitely have developed a soft spot for the horror comics of the 70s and 80s. So I'm one of those that,
the Cthulhu Man cover, the one of the covers was actually inspired by the old EC Comics covers from the 50s. It's very much the woman in the low cut lab coat crawling away from the monsters that hovers over her.
That's perfect.
That was very much a homage to those EC Comics. But that's before the 70s even. Most of those were biggest in the 50s probably.
Yep. And then they did all the reprints and stuff in
the
80s, and then
you get them again in the, you know. But
that's great. So those are my official notes, but I'm not done with you yet.
No problem.
So the first thing that I want to do is I'm going to take a screenshot, and then I'll use that as the thumbnail for the YouTube. So it'll be it's a time to basically get to pose. I have a shark shaped shot glass that I got in an aquarium, but I don't have it in here, and I should have thought of that because I definitely would have posed with it. But all right, let me get my keyboard shortcut here, and then we will do this. All right, so I'll count us down. 3, 2, 1. Cool. And then the other thing is the thing that I warned you about, so I don't catch you off guard. But part of the reason why I love doing this show is because I get to talk to people that are making comics that have all different backgrounds, all different walks of life, all different experiences. And yet we all end up in this indie comics community. So I love ending every episode or stream or whatever you want to call these just by hearing from the creators directly. So if there's anything you want people to hear from you specifically, it could be like, hey, go back Samson 1 and 2 on Kickstarter. It could be about why sharks are the superior ocean animal. The content doesn't matter specifically to me so much as I just want you to have some space to share anything you want. So the floor is yours, Ben.
Yeah, one thing we didn't discuss, you know, obviously I'd like all your viewers to go back to Samson, but even if they don't want to do that, all I ask is they go to the Kickstarter page, because right below the video, they'll find a link where they can read Samson #1 for free. You know, they don't have to sign up for my email list. They don't have to do anything. They hit the link and it opens the Google Doc with the first issue of Samson. Not only the first issue, but the bonus features that are in the back, including the stories of the real life Nazi scientists who the villains of the comic book are based on, because they were real people and it tells you about them. So all I ask is that they go there, click on that link, and check out the book for free, read it. If they like it, then I greatly appreciate if they then backed for issue 2 as well, or backed for all my back issues, which again, as I mentioned, are set at a very reasonable price, sub Marvel prices for my digital copies, and what you pay at a Comic-Con if you came up and saw me for my back issues, but you get them shipped to you, and you get the digital copies thrown in, and you get a print of that Alex Ross print. So yeah, that's the main thing I think I want people to know that we didn't have a chance to discuss, is I'm giving away Samson #1 for free. Anybody who wants to read it, check it out. It's there. That's all you have to do. And if you like comic books, you're getting to read a free one. So if you don't like it, it's no harm, no foul. You don't have to back. And if you do, I hope you'll consider it.
Yeah, that's great. And if you like seeing Nazis get punched in the face, there's some of that too. So
yeah, that's going to pick up more in issue 2 too, where as his origin continues, because obviously in issue 1 he's much less capable than he will be going forward.
Yep. Awesome. Well, Ben, I had a great time talking with you. I appreciate you.
I had a great time too.
Letting me pick your brain. Stay tuned. Hang tight after I end this. I got logistics for you, but for everybody else, have a fantastic June. We are officially now in June 1st, which is just insane. If you like this, share it with your networks or whatever, like it, subscribe, do the things that YouTubers say. I don't know. I'm just in it to talk comics with creators. So what's a good podcast though without a good tagline? This one's mine. Go do what's good for you, punks, and read some indie comics because we are out of here. And then we dance.